Hello, everyone, and welcome back. When we think of the past, especially the early decades of the 20th century, our minds tend to slip into images shaped by movies and photographs, sleek cars, bright shop windows, cheerful crowds, or the shimmer of a dance hall filled with music. But if you pause with me for a moment, breathe slowly, and imagine the world waking up 100 years ago, you will find a very different picture. A kidder one, a colder one, and in many ways, a more honest one. That is where our story begins tonight. Good evening, friends. I am glad you are here. Let us take a gentle step back in time, not to the celebrations or the glamour of the 1920 seconds, but into the quiet, unpolished rhythm of everyday life. Specifically, the life of a single mother who rises long before the sun. This is not a tale of grand events or famous names. It is the story of someone whose world was stitched together through effort, patience, and a kind of quiet endurance that does not make headlines but shapes the heart of history. So let us open the door softly and enter her morning. Long before the sunlight touches the rooftops outside, before the street wakes to the clatter of carts and the rumble of the first trolley, she is already awake. There is no alarm clock on the small table beside her bed, just instinct, responsibility, and the subtle sounds of a household that never completely sleeps. A cough from the child in the next room, the faint groan of floorboards adjusting to the cold, the lingering memory of yesterday's exhaustion, nudging her out of dreams she barely had time to visit. The room is dim. The air is chilly, the kind of cold that settles into the corners and wraps itself around every surface. She opens her eyes slowly, not because she is rested, but because there is no luxury in lingering. Her back protests as she rises. The mattress beneath her has long since given up any ambition of comfort. It dips where it should not, pushes where it should not, and yet it is the only place she can lay her head at the end of a long day. She reaches for the sweater hanging on the chair, a sweater washed, dried, stretched, repaired, and loved through necessity. The threads near the cuffs are thinning, and the elbows carry old patches sewn carefully in evenings, when the children had finally settled into sleep. As she slips it on, she listens again. The house is still, the kind of stillness that comes right before the day begins to demand things from her. She moves quietly, partly out of habit, partly to avoid waking the little ones too soon. Stepping onto the floor, she feels the wood beneath her feet cool, slightly rough, uneven in places from years of being stepped on by children racing through the hallway. She tries not to wince as she stands upright. There is a familiar pull in her lower back, the sort of ache that is not sharp but constant, like a small reminder of how many mornings have started just like this. As she crosses the room, she pulls the curtain aside. Outside, the sky is still the color of slate. No warm glow yet. No suggestion that dawn is near. There is only the faint outline of rooftops layered against the horizon and a drifting wisp of smoke from a neighbor's chimney. The air must be cold out there. She can almost feel it through the thin glass. But the cold inside needs tending first. The stove sits against the far wall of the kitchen, a small iron thing that carries the entire weight of comfort in this home. Without it, the morning would be an unbroken march of shivers and a choir of complaints from half-asleep children. She kneels beside it, opening the front grate. The ashes inside are still faintly warm from the night before. She had banked the fire carefully, saving just enough heat to make the morning a little gentler. She lifts the coal bucket. It is lighter than she would like. Coal is expensive, and although she buys what she can, she always knows exactly how many days a pail must last. Still, She sets a few pieces inside the stove, arranging them the way her own mother once taught her, angled, so the air can move freely, so the fire breathes rather than smothers itself. She strikes a match. For a moment the flame trembles, then steadies, catching the edges of the coal. Soon, a soft glow spreads through the little chamber, faint but promising. While the stove warms, she prepares the kettle. The metal is scratched, the handle loose, but it works. She fills it with water from the sink, the tap squeaking in protest. Setting the kettle on the stove becomes a small ritual, a quiet pledge that today will begin, one breath at a time. A sound comes from the children's room, soft movement, a shift in blankets. She listens carefully, but all is calm for now. Good. A few minutes of stillness are precious. She begins arranging the items she will need for breakfast. A small tin of oats, yesterday's bread, wrapped in cloth to keep it from drying out entirely. A shallow bowl with the last bit of jam she has been saving for the weekend. She counts the oatmeal with her eyes, not measuring cups. Too much means less for tomorrow. Too little means children heading to school on empty stomachs. Balance becomes a kind of silent mathematics she performs daily. As the kettle warms, steam begins to stitch its way into the air, mingling with the cold and chasing it back into the corners. The house feels a little more alive. She takes a deep breath, allowing herself a moment to simply exist. The morning has no gentleness built into it. Whatever softness she wants, she has to create herself. She thinks of the day ahead, getting the children ready for school, walking them through the narrow streets, making sure their coats are buttoned, even if the buttons are mismatched. Then there is work, a full shift of standing, lifting, sorting, or typing, depending on the job she has managed to secure. The day will be long. Her feet will ache. Her back will complain again. But right now, in this small slice of morning, none of that has quite arrived yet. Here, she can breathe. The children begin to stir again, this time more clearly. A sleepy voice calls her name. She knows that tone, a blend of comfort and dependence. It is the kind of sound that reminds her of why she keeps moving, even when every part of her is tired. She walks to their room. The door creaks slightly as she opens it. Inside, the children are bundled together under blankets that have seen better days. The youngest rubs his eyes, hair sticking out in every direction. The oldest tries to pretend she is not waking up yet, burying her face deeper into the pillow. The middle child looks at her with a kind of dreamy confusion, as if unsure whether it is morning or still part of a dream. "Good morning, sweetheart," she whispers, smoothing the youngest child's hair. It is tangled, but soft. She lifts him gently into her arms, feeling the warmth of his small body against the cool air. As they shuffle toward the kitchen, she keeps her voice soft. Breakfast is almost ready. The stove is warm. It is a small comfort. But in a household like this, small comforts matter more than most people realize. She seats them at the table, their eyes still heavy. They watch her move around the kitchen, pouring hot water into the oats, stirring gently to avoid lumps. The smell of warm porridge begins to fill the room, simple but reassuring. One of the children asks, "Is it still dark outside?" She nods. But it won't be for long. The sun will catch up soon. The oldest finally sits up straight. "Will we be late today?" "No," she replies, stirring steadily. "We are on time. We always manage." She sets the bowls in front of them, a quiet pride in her movements. The food is plain, but it is warm. It is enough. As they eat, she sits with them, taking slow sips of her own tea, weak but warm. She looks at their faces in the soft, early light, each one carrying traces of childhood innocence, mixed with the seriousness that comes from growing up in a world that asks more from them than it should. She thinks, for just a moment, about how different their mornings could be if life had unfolded another way. But she does not dwell there. Instead, she focuses on the small and steady truth. They are together. They are here. And they have made it through another night. The stove hums quietly. The kettle clicks as it cools. The first hint of dawn glows faintly at the edge of the window. And so begins another day, a day shaped by love, by routine, by responsibility, and by the kind of strength that does not shout or demand attention. It simply continues, morning after morning, like the slow rise of the sun itself. If you sit with our story for a moment, you will notice something. Breakfast in this home is not a cheerful family scene from a picture book. It is not a table overflowing with food or a moment of relaxed conversation. Breakfast, in her world, is closer to a small battle she must win every morning. A quiet negotiation between hunger, limited supplies, and the hope of giving her children enough energy to make it through the day. The table tells the truth before anyone speaks. It is small, worn smooth by years of elbows, school papers, spilled milk, and hurried meals. The wood has its own memory of family life carved into it, dents from dropped forks, faded rings from cups left too long, and the soft, polished shine that comes only from constant use. Nothing here is decorative. Every object has been used until it cannot be used any further. On the table, she places the tin of oats with care. It is lighter now than it was at the beginning of the week, and she knows exactly how many mornings it must stretch before she can afford to buy another. She taps the side of the tin gently, more out of habit than anything, listening to the soft rattle inside. It is not much, but it is enough if she is careful. The bread, wrapped in cloth to keep it from drying into a brick, sits near her elbow. When she unwraps it, the crust is firmer than she would like. She presses it lightly with her thumb. Not soft, but still usable. She will slice it thinly, toast it lightly on the stove, and hope the warmth distracts the children from how stale it really is. The jam is almost gone. It sits in a small bowl like a treasure portioned out over days. A bright spot of sweetness that she saves mostly for the children. She looks at it for a moment, deciding whether today is a day to use it or a day to hold it back. Then she glances at her youngest, who rubs his eyes with tiny fists, and she decides a little sweetness might make the morning feel kinder. She moves gracefully around the kitchen, though her body is tired. Every action is deliberate, economical, nothing wasted, nothing unnecessary. She pours hot water into the pot of oats, stirring slowly with a wooden spoon that has seen more mornings than she cares to count. The steam rises, carrying with it the mild scent of warm grain. She stirs until the texture becomes smooth enough, knowing that any thicker will mean the oats disappear too quickly from the pot. Behind her, the children sit waiting. The oldest, trying to be patient, traces circles on the tabletop with her finger. The middle child swings his legs absent-mindedly, the heels of his shoes tapping the chair. The youngest lays his head on his folded arms, still half asleep. None of them complain yet. But they do not need to speak for her to know their thoughts. Children are honest eaters. Their faces reveal everything. She works quickly, scooping the oatmeal into bowls. The bowls do not match. One is chipped. Another has a faint crack that runs along the edge but has not broken through. She handles each one with the kind of gentleness you give to things you cannot afford to replace. As she serves the bowls, she divides the jam carefully, a small dot on each portion, spread thinly but evenly, so no one feels favored and so the sweetness touches every spoonful. It is a tiny luxury, but one that signals love more than indulgence. When she finally places the bowls in front of the children, something subtle shifts in the room. The youngest sits up. The middle child adjusts his posture. The oldest lifts her spoon and waits for a moment to see whether her mother will sit too. But of course, she does not. Not yet. There is still bread to slice. She picks up the loaf, steadies her hand, and cuts each piece slowly. The knife is dull, which makes the task harder, but she manages. She arranges the slices on the edge of the stove to warm. The heat softens them slightly, just enough so the children won't notice they are on their last usable day. As the bread warms, she finally sits down. Her seat is the one closest to the stove, partly for warmth, partly because she likes to stay near the kettle and the fire. A small cup of tea sits in front of her. It is weak, almost clear, but warm. The tea leaves were reused from yesterday. She will probably reuse them again for dinner. She wraps her hands around the cup, letting the heat seep into her fingers. The children begin to eat. Slowly at first, then with more focus, as the warmth of the oats spreads through them. They do not rave about the food. It does not taste like much, but they eat with the seriousness of routine. They know this meal matters. It is the fuel that will carry them through a long school day, filled with cold hallways, strict teachers, and lessons that require concentration they sometimes struggle to maintain. She watches them take each bite, not in judgment, but with quiet monitoring. She needs to know, are they still hungry? Do they look tired? Is there enough for everyone? She mentally calculates how much food remains for lunch and dinner. Running through recipes, she could stretch just a little further. Her own spoon rests beside her cup, untouched. She will eat after they do, whatever is left. And if there is not any left, she will drink another cup of tea and move on with her day. It would not be the first time. But none of this shows on her face. Her expression stays soft, encouraging. When the youngest looks up at her with oatmeal on his chin, she smiles. When the middle child asks, "Is there more bread?" she answers, gently, "Yes, there is." Just a moment. She turns the slices on the stove so they warm evenly, then brings them to the table. They eat in a rhythm that the family has come to understand deeply. Breakfast is not a time for long conversations or laughter. It is a moment of focus, of gathering strength, of preparing for school and work. The oldest keeps an eye on the clock. The middle child tries to eat as slowly as possible to delay leaving the warm kitchen. The youngest swings his feet and hums softly between bites. While they eat, the mother looks around the room. The morning light has finally begun to show through the window, soft and pale. It reveals the wear on the furniture, the fraying edges of the curtains, the small cracks in the walls. But it also brings warmth, reminding her that no matter how challenging the day ahead may be, she has made it through another morning again. She rises from her chair and begins clearing the dishes as soon as the children finish. She wipes their faces, adjusts their collars, smooths their hair. These small gestures matter more today than they might later in the afternoon. Morning is the time for presenting them to the world. Their clothes may be patched, their shoes worn, but she does everything she can to send them out looking cared for. It is her unspoken promise to them. You may not have much, but you have me. The children gather their things: books, scarves, hats that do not quite fit. The oldest helps the youngest with his coat. The mother feels a familiar mix of pride and ache watching them. Children learn teamwork early when resources are limited. Before leaving, the mother looks at the table one more time. A few crumbs, a smear of jam, the bowls stacked neatly. She sees not a mess, but a sign of accomplishment. Breakfast happened. Everyone ate. The day has officially begun. She wraps a scarf around her neck, slipping her hands into gloves that have lost some of their warmth but still offer protection. She takes the children's hands, one on each side. They step into the morning air together. Behind them, the kitchen cools slowly. The stove hums. The teacup sits empty, and the home, despite its challenges, holds the quiet strength of a place where love is measured not by abundance, but by intention. Because in her world, breakfast is not about comfort. It is about survival. And every single morning she wins that battle, one careful scoop of oats at a time. If breakfast is a small daily triumph, then getting the children dressed is the next quiet hurdle this mother faces, one that feels simple from the outside, but is, in truth, its own delicate balancing act. Clothing in this home is not about style, or trends, or even preference. It is about practicality, durability, and the fine art of mending things faster than they fall apart. When you have more children than money and more needs than resources, every button, every patch, every shoelace becomes part of a system of survival. The morning light, still thin and new, creeps into the hallway as the mother gathers the clothes set aside last night. She irons nothing, not because she does not care, but because there is no iron to heat and no time to fuss. Instead, she smooths each piece with her hands, pulling fabric straight, folding down collars, checking for tears that may have grown overnight. Her eyes move, quickly trained, practical, intuitive. The oldest child's dress is laid out first. It used to belong to a cousin 3 years older, and even then it was passed down after being outgrown. The color has faded from its original shade, now settling into something soft and muted by countless washings. Patches decorate the dress like quiet badges of endurance, one near the hem, another on the side seam, a third on the sleeve where a tear once widened after a fall in the schoolyard. Each patch holds a story, though none of them glamorous. They were stitched by hand, illuminated by a dim lamp, long after the children fell asleep. The mother fingers the stitching for a moment. She remembers sitting at the kitchen table, needle in hand, trying to keep her eyes open while the fire died down. She had pricked her finger once, wiping the tiny drop of blood on her apron before continuing. The patch needed to be done. The dress needed to last at least one more season. And tonight, she will probably have more mending to do. Next comes the middle child's shirt. White once. Now a soft beige that speaks honestly of many washings, many school days, many scrapes and playground adventures. The collar is frayed. The buttons do not match, one replaced with a brown button from an old coat, another with a pearly white button found in her sewing tin. A third is slightly loose. She tugs it gently and makes a mental note. Tonight, tighten it. Little details matter when the world already judges you harshly. The trousers folded beside the shirt have knees that betray the life of any active boy. She has reinforced them so many times that the fabric beneath the patches has become nearly irrelevant. The patches themselves, cut from old pillowcases and worn-out skirts, create a patchwork landscape across the knees, functional, if not beautiful. The stitches are strong. They need to be. Then there is the youngest child's outfit, a small knitted sweater with a stretched collar and sleeves too short after a recent growth spurt. She sighs softly as she picks it up. Children grow so quickly, outpacing the slow rhythm of her sewing needle. But she gives the sweater a gentle stretch anyway, smoothing its fibers with practiced hands. She hopes it will be enough for now. Shoes might be the most difficult part of all. The six-down, oldest child's boots still have sturdy soles, but the tongues inside rub uncomfortably because the lining wore down long ago. She inserts folded cloth to soften the pressure, an old trick learned from her mother. The middle child's laces are frayed and uneven. One is shorter than the other, due to a knot that refused to untangle. She sighs, but threads them both through the eyelets anyway, tying a double knot just to be safe. The youngest child's shoes make her pause. They are small, scuffed at the toes, and almost too tight. She knew this day was coming. She had hoped it would wait another few weeks. She presses her thumb against the front of the shoe, feeling where his tiny toes end. They are close, too close. Her chest tightens a little. Buying new shoes is not a simple decision. It is a financial weight that requires sacrifice in another part of the budget. Coal, groceries, a school notebook. It always feels like one choice takes away from another. Still, she tells herself, we will make it work. Mothers of her time often whispered this same promise into their own hands, as if speaking it aloud would stretch the family's resources just a little further. When she calls the children to get dressed, they come with varying levels of enthusiasm. The oldest, used to the routine, slips into her dress and adjusts it without complaint. She has learned to live with patches, to ignore the stares of classmates whose families are better off. She ties her hair back with a ribbon that has frayed edges, but still holds a bit of charm when tightened just right. The middle child tugs on his shirt. He frowns at the mismatched buttons, not because he cares about fashion, but because he knows other children might tease him. His mother kneels beside him, fastening the last button carefully. Buttons do not matter, she says with a soft smile. What matters is that you are warm. He nods, shoulders straightening. The youngest, though, wriggles and squirms. He does not like the feel of the sweater around his neck, nor the stiffness of the shoes. He scrunches his face in frustration. She gently kneels and speaks softly. I know it is uncomfortable, sweetheart, but it is cold outside. Let us get through the morning. All right. He rests his forehead against her shoulder, accepting the compromise. As she helps the children, her own clothing sits quietly in the corner, a reminder of how far down the list her own needs fall. Her dress is simple, patched at the waist, worn thin at the elbows. She runs her fingers along the seams, checking for weak spots. It needs mending again. She will do it tonight, or tomorrow, or whenever she can stay awake long enough. When she finally gets dressed herself, she chooses the coat with the least visible wear. It still fits, though snugly around the shoulders. The lining is gone, leaving the fabric rough against her skin. She pulls her scarf tight, covering the neckline, so the worst of the fraying does not show. Her gloves have holes near the fingertips, but they offer some warmth. She checks the children's appearances one last time, straightens a collar, smooths a dress, ties a ribbon, adjusts a hat. The ritual is familiar, almost comforting. These little acts allow her to send them into the world looking cared for, even if the world does not see the labor behind it. Stepping back, she sees the picture. 3 children bundled in layers of love, disguised as hand-me-downs. Their outfits may not match. Their shoes may not be perfect. Their coats may not be new. But they are warm, They are presentable. They are ready. And that is enough. As they step toward the door, she grabs a small sewing tin from the shelf. She always carries it with her, a spool of thread, a few needles, spare buttons collected from old garments, folded scraps of fabric. It is her emergency kit, her quiet shield against any clothing disaster the day might deliver. Walking outside, the wind greets them coldly. She pulls the children closer. Their patched clothes may not be perfect protection, but they hold. They endure, just like she does. The neighbors see them pass by. Some offer kind nods. Others glance quickly, noticing the wear, the patches, the signs of a family living on the edge of poverty. But she keeps her head high. These clothes may not be new, but they are honest. They tell the story of work, of care, of resilience, stitched into every seam. For her, clothing is not a measure of worth, it is a measure of effort. And every morning, she shows the world just how much effort she is willing to give. Stepping outside in the morning is always a kind of transition, like crossing a small bridge between the private world she protects and the public world that observes her. Inside the home, the patched clothing, mismatched buttons, and carefully stretched groceries make sense. They belong to routines shaped by necessity and love. But the moment the mother and her children open the front door, everything becomes a little more exposed. The street is not unkind. Exactly. But it is watchful. And in this era, watchfulness often comes with silent verdicts. The cold greets them first. A brisk morning wind cuts through the gaps in old coats and stiff wool scarves. The children's breaths appear in small clouds as they step onto the sidewalk. Their mittens, worn thin at the palms, grip their school bags tightly. The mother adjusts the youngest child's hat, pulling it down over his ears. He shivers, and she tucks him close. The street is already awake in its own slow way. A milk cart rattles along the cobblestones, the horse's hooves striking a steady rhythm. A baker opens his shutters, letting out the warm smell of bread that most families can't afford, fresh. A neighbor sweeps her porch, pausing briefly to glance over. Another woman, carrying laundry, nods politely but looks down a little too quickly. These are small moments, but the mother feels each one. Not as accusations, but as reminders. People see everything. They notice the worn edges, the uneven buttons, the children's shoes that have seen too many winters. They rarely say anything outright, but silence has its own way of speaking. The family walks in a small cluster, keeping close together for warmth. The mother holds the youngest child's hand, her fingers numb even inside her thin gloves. The middle child swings his arms, pretending he does not feel the cold. The oldest presses forward with determination, perhaps already preparing to navigate the expectations waiting for her at school. As they move down the street, they pass shop windows that reflect their image back at them. The mother sees it clearly. 3 children bundled in well-loved garments, and herself walking with deliberate calm, as if composedness were a shield. She straightens her posture slightly. Not a performance, just a reminder that dignity can exist even in scarcity. They approach the intersection where several families converge on their way to school. Some mothers wear thicker coats, their collars trimmed with fur. Some children have matching mittens, polished boots, and ribbons tied in perfect bows. Their laughter carries easily across the street. It is not meant to exclude anyone. But the contrast is sharp. One mother glances over at the single mother and her children, not with cruelty, but with curiosity, tinged by something unspoken, a kind of wondering how she manages, day after day, without the support of a partner. The single mother gives a polite smile. She has practiced it enough that it feels natural. A smile that says, "I am doing my best. I am not ashamed." They reach a corner where the cobblestones dip, forming a shallow puddle from last night's drizzle. The mother guides the children carefully around it. Shoes must be preserved. Socks must stay dry. A wet foot can ruin an entire day in a cold classroom. The youngest child, full of the kind of energy that only small children possess, tries to hop over the puddle. The mother's heart skips as he almost loses his balance. She catches his arm just in time. A nearby passerby chuckles softly, not unkindly, but even harmless laughter can feel like an evaluation. When they finally reach the schoolyard, the scene is a whirl of motion. Children run in circles, scarves trailing behind them like little banners. Teachers stand near the entrance, clipboard in hand, coats buttoned tightly. The sound is a blend of chatter, laughter, scolding, and the sharp ring of the school bell preparing to call order. The mother steadies herself. This is the moment she always feels the most visible. As the children step forward into the yard, their clothes patched, mismatched, carefully preserved, become part of the sea of morning comparisons. Some children glance at them with simple curiosity. Others, more observant, notice the wear. The mother sees these reactions, even if her children do not. The oldest child joins her class quickly, her posture straight. She knows how to navigate these glances. She has learned that kindness is sometimes quiet, and that confidence can fill the spaces where new clothes cannot. The middle child hesitates for a moment. He looks back at his mother, seeking reassurance. She nods, kneeling to adjust his collar, smoothing it flat. "You look just right," she says softly. He believes her, because her voice has a way of making even difficult truths feel sturdy. The youngest clings to her coat for an extra second. His shoes pinch. His sweater itches. But she cups his face gently, warming his cheeks with her hands. "You will do great today," she whispers. "And I will be right here after school." He nods, then scurries off toward the group of children forming a small line nearby. His steps are uncertain, but hopeful. One of the teachers notices the single mother and approaches with a polite but distant greeting. The teacher's eyes flick briefly over the children, clean but modestly dressed, patched but presentable. "Good morning," she says in a voice that is professional and practiced. "Good morning," the mother replies. There is no malice in the exchange, but also no warmth. The teacher, like many during the era, carries unspoken biases shaped by the social expectations of the time. Single motherhood often meant struggling financially, and struggle was often misinterpreted as neglect. The mother feels this in the teacher's tone, in her quick glance, in the shallow politeness that suggests an assessment rather than a welcome. Still, the mother remains calm. She has learned that composure is her strongest tool. She thanks the teacher, then steps back as the final bell rings. In the yard, the children form lines, preparing to enter the building. Their small figures blend into the crowd until each one becomes just another silhouette against the brick walls and tall windows. The mother watches closely, memorizing the last moment she will see them until afternoon. As the children disappear inside, she exhales slowly, a breath that carries relief, worry, hope, and fatigue all at once. The schoolyard empties. Parents drift away. Some walk in pairs, chatting about chores and errands. Some leave briskly, eager to move on with their day. The mother stands alone for a moment, her hands tightening around her gloves. She knows that once she turns away from this gate, she steps into her own long journey toward work, toward grocery stalls, toward responsibilities that never fully pause. But this moment, the moment after drop-off, always requires a quiet recalibration. She has sent her children into a world that sees them more clearly than it understands them. She can protect them at home, but outside, she must trust that her efforts carry them through the day. She takes a final glance at the school building, squares her shoulders, and begins walking. The streets feel a bit colder now that she is alone, but she moves forward with purpose. She has survived another morning of preparation, another morning of guiding her children through the gaze of the world. And though the judgments linger, silent, subtle, omnipresent, they do not stop her. They never have. Because every step she takes, every patch she sews, every breakfast she prepares, and every school drop-off she navigates is woven from the same quiet strength. A determination to give her children stability, even when the world offers none to her. Once the children disappear behind the tall school doors and their voices fade into the morning hum, the mother begins the next chapter of her day, the one that drains her strength the most, yet receives the least recognition. Work, for her, is not a pursuit of passion or a ladder to climb. It is a necessity, a contract with survival, something that must be done because the alternative is unthinkable. She walks briskly toward the factory district, her coat pulled tightly around her as the cold wind nips at her cheeks. The air carries the distant hum of machinery, the metallic clatter that never fully sleeps. For most of the neighborhood, this sound means industry and progress. For her, it signals hours of standing, lifting, bending, repeating. Hours that feel longer than the clock ever admits. Her workplace sits among a row of aging brick buildings, each with tall windows fogged by the warmth trapped inside. Smoke rises steadily from the chimneys. Workers, mostly women, file toward the entrance with familiar expressions, tired, determined, resigned. Their footsteps echo on the pavement, blending into a soft chorus of shared experience. Inside, the warmth hits her immediately, but not in a comforting way. Factory heat is heavy, a mixture of steam, sweat, oil, and the constant vibration of machines that breathe like restless beasts. The moment she steps in, she pins up her hair, rolls up her sleeves, and prepares her hands for another day of repetitive tasks. Her station is simple: a metal table, a stool she rarely uses, and the machine that dominates her entire shift. Its gears turn steadily, shaking the floor slightly. She inspects it out of habit, checking for loose screws or misaligned parts, small issues that could cost her hours if ignored. She ties an apron around her waist and begins. Her job varies depending on what orders need filling. Some days she sorts, bolts, and washers, her fingers moving with practiced speed, separating sizes without needing to look. Other days she assembles small metal pieces, sliding them into place again and again until her hands ache. On the hardest days, she carries boxes from one end of the room to the other, feeling the strain in her shoulders long before noon. The noise is constant, so loud that words often require exaggerated gestures or shouted fragments. Over time, she has learned to hear meaning in the pauses, the slight change in pitch when a machine malfunctions, the abrupt silence when something jams, the shift in rhythm that signals lunchtime. But ordinary conversation, almost impossible. Still, she senses the presence of her coworkers around her, women who, like her, juggle families, bills, and fatigue. They exchange brief nods or tight smiles across the room. Little gestures that say, "I see you. I know you are tired too. Every few minutes, her hands brush against cold metal. She sorts, stacks, aligns. Her movements become mechanical, not because she is detached, but because she must conserve energy. The body finds its own rhythm when survival depends on it. By mid-morning, the air grows warmer. Her hair clings to her forehead. Her back throbs from bending. Her shoulders roll forward unconsciously, as though trying to shield her from the endless vibration of the machines. She stretches discreetly whenever she can, but there is little time for relief. The supervisor walks the aisle every hour or so, clipboard in hand, gaze sharp. He does not scold often, but his presence alone keeps everyone alert. She works steadily, aware that any slowdown could reduce her pay. Factories in this era often pay by piece, not by hour. Each task completed is a step toward the wages that keep her family afloat. There is no room for distraction, no margin for error. The lunch bell rings abruptly, a shrill clang that slices through the machinery hum. Workers step away from their stations with a mix of relief and urgency. Lunch is short, barely enough time to sit, let alone relax. She pulls out her meal, a small piece of bread saved from yesterday, a thin slice of cheese, wrapped in paper, and a flask of lukewarm tea. She eats slowly, savoring each bite, not for its flavor, but for its necessity. Around her, other women unwrap similar meals: cold potatoes, leftover stew, a bit of fruit on lucky days. There is no extravagance here, just sustenance. Sometimes the women talk quietly during lunch about the cost of coal, the rising price of flour, the latest news about wages, or the illnesses children caught during the winter. Their conversations reveal lives as burdened as hers. They share advice, stories, worries. The sense of community is subtle but real. Today, one coworker asks softly, "How are your little ones doing?" The mother smiles faintly. "Growing too fast?" she answers. "And always hungry." They laugh, not because it is funny, but because humor makes hardship easier to carry. When the lunch break ends, the bell rings again too soon. Everyone returns to their stations, and the cycle resumes. The afternoon is the most difficult part of the day. Fatigue settles into her muscles. Her fingers move stiffly at times. The repetitive motion blurs into a quiet ache. At moments, she catches herself staring at the machine, her mind drifting to thoughts of her children. Are they warm enough in school? Did the teacher treat them kindly today? Will they be hungry when they get home? One slip in attention, however, can lead to mistakes. Her hands must stay alert. The machines, though helpful, are unforgiving. A caught finger or misplaced piece can cause real injury. She steadies herself, focuses on each motion, pushes through. Around 3 of the clock, her back screams for rest. She shifts her weight from one foot to the other, stretching subtly. The supervisor glances her way. She straightens immediately. The pressure of being a single mother, working in a time with few safety nets, sits heavy on her shoulders. Losing this job is not an option. Still, she endures. The clock on the wall moves slowly, as if resisting progress. The last hour of the day feels longer than all the hours before it combined. Her apron is dusted with metal shavings. Her hands smell faintly of oil. Her feet ache in her worn shoes. Exhaustion lives in her bones. But when the final bell rings, she exhales deeply. The machines slow. Conversations rise slightly. Workers stretch, rub their arms, loosen their hair, breathe. She removes her apron, folds it neatly, and hangs it on its hook. The habit is automatic, respectful, one of the few things she can control in a life full of variables. She wipes her hands on a cloth, then checks them for new blisters. A small one has formed near her thumb. She presses it gently. It will burst later. She will clean it when she gets home. She walks out with the crowd. The air outside is chilly but refreshing after hours. Inside the factory's warm haze, her steps are slow at first, allowing her muscles to adjust. She wraps her scarf closer around her neck, feeling the fabric scratch lightly against her skin. The sun hangs low now, dipping toward the horizon. She calculates how long she has before the children are dismissed from school and how quickly she needs to walk to make it in time. She cannot be late. Children waiting alone too long draw attention, and attention is not something she wants from teachers or neighbors. As she moves through the streets, her fatigue mixes with purpose. She is tired, more tired than she ever admits aloud, but she keeps going. Because this work, hard as it is, anchors her family. It keeps a roof over their heads, keeps food on the table, keeps the fire burning just a little longer each night. And so she walks, one foot in front of the other, her posture straight despite the ache. She may not earn much. Her job may not bring praise, security, or comfort, but it brings something essential: the ability to keep her children fed, warm, and safe. And that, to her, is worth every sore muscle, every long shift, every ounce of energy she pours into the day. By the time the lunch bell rings, it does not feel like a break so much as a brief pause in an endlessly looping song. The clang echoes through the factory floor with a sharpness that slices through the machine noise, and for a moment everyone freezes, hands hovering mid-task, shoulders relaxing by a fraction, eyes lifting from the monotony of bolts and metal dust. She steps away from her station with a sigh that barely escapes her lips. It is not relief, exactly, just the acknowledgement that her body can stop moving for a few minutes. Her back aches in a straight line, from the base of her neck down to her hips. Her fingers throb with that dull rhythmic pulse that comes from working too fast for too long. Her stomach reminds her that she has eaten nothing since dawn, except a few sips of weak tea and a threadbare slice of toast she gave most of to her youngest. Lunch awaits. But lunch in the 1,920 seconds for a working woman is its own kind of endurance ritual. She finds her usual spot second bench by the cracked window, where the draft sometimes fights its way through the frame. The bench wobbles slightly, but it is familiar. Familiarity is a small comfort in a day that demands strength at every turn. She opens her lunch pail quietly. There is no surprise inside. She packed it before sunrise, with the resigned efficiency of someone performing a routine practiced 1,000 times. Inside rests a folded cloth, a chunk of yesterday's bread, slightly stiff at the edges, a thin slice of cheese, barely holding its shape, and a piece of apple she cut carefully to remove the browning parts. She lifts each item with care, arranging them on her lap as softly as if they were fragile artifacts. The bread cracks faintly as she bites into it. It tastes of flour and air. The cheese adds a whisper of sharpness, and the apple, though bruised, offers a small sweetness that almost feels like a treat. She chews slowly, not because she wants to savor it, but because she wants the food to last longer than the break. Around her, the women settle into their own routines. Some eat quietly, shoulders slumped like folded coats. Others talk softly, voices mixing with the hiss of steam pipes and the low hum of machines cooling off. One woman unwraps a hard-boiled egg and halves it with the precision of a jeweler. Another digs into a tin of leftover beans with a determination that borders on comedic. There are no extravagant meals. No soup steaming in bowls. No pastries. No fresh fruit, except the kind approaching its last day on earth. Everyone here eats what they can afford, and even that feels like it gets smaller each week. A group of men gathers in the far corner, cracking jokes too loudly, adding a sort of background soundtrack that half irritates, half comforts. Their laughter feels distant, belonging to a world with fewer responsibilities and far fewer mouths to feed. The mother sits quietly, absorbing the room. A co-worker beside her, Margaret, a widow with gray beginning to show at her temples, gives her a tired smile. "Your youngest feeling better?" Margaret asks, unfolding a newspaper-wrapped sandwich that appears to hold only mustard and hope. "Better," the mother replies softly. "Still coughing at night, but stronger." Margaret nods, knowingly. Illness lingers in this era. Nothing resolves quickly. Everything is a long fight. Another woman chimes in from the next bench. "Mine did not sleep at all. Growing pains," the doctor says. "I told him, growing pains do not explain shouting at the ceiling until 2 a.m. They chuckle gently, not because it is funny, but because laughter makes exhaustion easier to share. The room smells faintly of oil, soap, and lunches wrapped in wax paper. A soft rumble of conversation fills the air. It is the sound of human presence after hours spent drowning in machinery. The minutes slip by quickly. She looks down at the remnants of her meal. A few crumbs. A small curl of cheese rinds. A sip of tea left at the bottom of her flask. She finishes it even though it is lukewarm. Even though the taste reminds her of metal more than leaves. Somewhere in the room, a supervisor clears his throat. Not loudly, but deliberately. A reminder that the break is temporary. That rest is a privilege in short supply. A few women hastily finish the last bites of their meals. Others tuck their lunches away neatly, careful not to waste even the tiniest crumb. In a world where food security depends on next week's wages, leftovers are not discarded. They are preserved like treasure. The mother wipes her hands on her apron. The oil and flour do not quite lift. They never do. As she prepares to return to work, she feels the familiar heaviness settling into her shoulders, like putting on a coat made of fatigue. She rolls her wrists, flexing her fingers quietly. The afternoon shift will ask more of her hands than the morning ever did. Lunch is nearly over, but she stays seated for one more breath. One small, precious breath where she lets her gaze drift out the window. The street outside is alive, with activity vendors shouting prices, children tugging on parents' coats, streetcars clattering by. Life continues, even as she sits still. A moment later, the bell rings again. The room shifts instantly. The low murmur of conversation evaporates. Bodies rise from benches. Lunches are tucked away. Aprons retied. Hair smoothed. Expressions reset. Everyone returns to the rhythm of survival. She stands too, straightening her back. The ache is sharp, but she ignores it. She has learned to ignore so many things. The cold creeping through the floorboards, the headache that pulses behind her eyes, the sorrowful habit of dreaming of a softer life, only when sleep threatens to claim her. Lunch may offer a pause, but it does not offer rest. Rest is a luxury she cannot afford. Not today. Not any day. She returns to her station as the machines roar back to life like waking beasts demanding attention. One last quiet thought passes through her mind. before she picks up the first piece of metal. Just a few more hours, just a few more hours until the children's voices reach me again. And with that, she works, focused, steady, tireless in all the ways a mother must be. Lunch is over. The day continues. And she continues with it because she always must. If the morning shift feels like a test of endurance, then the afternoon is something deeper, something that drains, not just the muscles, but the mind. The long hours stretch ahead like an endless hallway, and each ticking minute feels heavier than the last. Afternoon fatigue is not just tiredness. It is a slow, quiet battle that takes place inside the body and behind the eyes, where only the person living it truly understands the weight. By the time the clock strikes 1, the factory has already reclaimed the workers with full force. Machines thunder back to life with a roar that shakes the rafters. The floor hums with vibration. Dust floats in the beams of light slipping through grimy windows, glittering like tiny reminders of how much the air holds. Particles of metal, flour, coal, sweat, hours of labor suspended in motion. The mother returns to her station with the practiced resignation of someone who knows there is no choice in the matter. She ties her apron again, checks the machine gears, and allows her body to slip back into the rhythm that consumes most of her waking hours. At first, she moves steadily. Her hands know exactly where to place each piece. Her fingers curl and release with mechanical precision. Her eyes scan the metal parts automatically, searching for dents, misalignments, and flaws. She is skilled at what she does, faster than most, more careful than many. Not because she loves the work, but because she understands what even a small mistake might cost. But as the hours creep on, her body begins sending out signals, soft at first, then louder. A dull ache forms in the center of her spine, spreading outward like a slow-moving tide. Her knees twinge whenever she shifts her weight. Her shoulders carry the stiffness of a load she did not realize she was lifting. And her fingers, her poor fingers, sting with tiny, repetitive pains from gripping metal and guiding it into place. The factory heat grows stifling. Morning warmth becomes afternoon heaviness. Sweat gathers behind her neck and soaks into the collar of her dress. Her hair, pinned earlier with care, loosens into soft strands that cling to her temples. She wipes her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a faint streak of dust across her skin. It does not matter. No one here is clean. No one leaves this building without the marks of the day pressed into their clothes and skin. The supervisor walks by again, boots clicking sharply against the concrete floor. His shadow passes over her workspace. She straightens instinctively, increasing her pace, even though her fingers threaten to cramp. He does not speak to her. He rarely does. But his silence carries meaning. Keep working. Keep up. Keep producing. She knows the expectations. She meets them because she must. Her thoughts drift to her children. The oldest, likely seated in a wooden desk under dim lights, practicing writing exercises or solving long arithmetic problems. The middle child, tapping his foot impatiently as he waits for recess. The youngest, perhaps looking out the window, thinking of her. She wonders whether they are warm enough, whether they liked the bread she packed, whether their classmates looked at them kindly. But even these thoughts begin to slip away as the fatigue deepens. There is a moment, somewhere between mid-afternoon and late afternoon, when her vision blurs slightly. She blinks, shakes her head, and tries to recenter her focus. It is the kind of exhaustion that feels like sinking, not a sudden drop, but a slow descent into heaviness. It wraps around her like a weighted blanket made of obligation. Her shoulders slump without her realizing. Her breath grows shallow. The repetitive motion becomes hypnotic. Sort, place, align, repeat. Time betrays her in these hours. Minutes stretch into long, unbending lines. The clock on the wall refuses to hurry. Its hands crawl like insects across the face, each movement reminding her that the day is still far from finished. A co-worker at the next station coughs repeatedly, a deep, hollow sound that speaks of cold weather and insufficient heating at home. Another woman mutters under her breath, rubbing her wrist where pain has begun radiating from the joint. The sounds blend into the background, forming a quiet chorus of exhaustion. By 3 of the clock, her legs feel like stone pillars holding up a fragile structure. Her feet burn inside shoes that never fit perfectly. She wiggles her toes discreetly to restore circulation. The relief is brief. Her mouth feels dry. She reaches for the flask of water she brought, only to find that it is empty. She had forgotten how much she drank during lunch. There will be no relief until she arrives home. Still, she keeps moving. Her movements grow slower, not enough to attract reprimand, but enough that she notices every second. Her body feels like it exists in 2 halves, one half performing the work, the other half watching from a distance, wondering how she is still standing. She thinks of the evening ahead. Dinner to cook, groceries to buy, children to collect, homework to supervise, floors to sweep, water to heat, clothes to mend, coal to measure, bills to consider. It is a second shift that begins the moment she leaves this one. But right now, she cannot think too far ahead. She survives the day in increments, task by task, hour by hour, breath by breath. Her eyes grow heavy. She blinks hard to clear them. Focus. Keep going. Just until the bell. Just until the bell. She picks up another handful of metal parts. The cool surface shocks her fingers awake temporarily. She works faster, not from renewed energy, but from determination that rises whenever her body threatens to falter. At some point, a co-worker next to her drops a tool. It clatters loudly onto the floor. The sound startles the mother awake from the fog she did not realize she had slipped into. She inhales sharply. Her heart beats faster. The supervisor glances over, frowning. The coworker apologizes quickly, picking up the tool with shaking fingers. The mother steadies her breath again. She reminds herself, "You cannot fall behind. Not now. Not ever." Because falling behind could mean fewer pieces completed, fewer pennies earned. It could mean being considered unreliable. It could mean losing the job entirely. Her body protests again. This time, her wrist aches sharply when she twists it a certain way. A small swelling has formed near the bone, likely from overuse, possibly from strain. She presses it gently against her apron. It hurts. As she keeps working, the factory air now feels thick, like breathing through cloth. She imagines fresh air waiting outside. The thought gives her a sliver of strength, just enough to keep going. Finally, as the afternoon sun begins its slow descent outside the fogged windows, the last hour arrives. The room whispers with a subtle shift in energy hope, reaching its fingers into exhaustion. She presses through that final stretch with the same quiet determination that shapes every moment of her life. Her fingers tremble. Her back aches endlessly. Her feet feel as though they are sinking into the floor. But she does not stop. When the end of day bell finally rings a loud, blessed sound, it is like a gentle hand lifting her from the fog. A wave of relief moves through the workers. Tools drop. Aprons untie. Shoulders loosen. A few women stretch their arms with soft groans. The mother wipes her forehead, releases a breath she did not realize she was holding, and steps away from her station. Her legs feel unsteady, as though adjusting to a world that is not vibrating beneath her feet. She gathers her things slowly, not because she wants to linger, but because her body needs a moment to transition from endless motion to stillness. The afternoon fatigue remains clinging to her like dust, but now she can move forward, toward her children, toward the evening tasks, toward the life she builds piece by piece. Her workday may be over, but her responsibilities are not. Still, she manages a small, tired smile. She made it through another day, and tomorrow she will do it again, because that is what strength looks like when the world is not watching. Payday comes only once a week, but it feels less like a reward and more like standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down, calculating, measuring every inch before you take a step. For many workers, payday means a brief sigh of relief. But for her, a single mother balancing survival on the thinnest of margins, payday is a quiet storm inside her mind. The factory whistle blows a little differently on Fridays. There is a subtle ripple through the workers, a flicker of anticipation, mixed with caution. People stand a bit straighter, hurry a bit faster, steal glances toward the small office where pay envelopes sit stacked in tidy piles. She wipes her hands on her apron, fingers trembling slightly. Not from excitement, from the anxiety that always comes with this day. Payday means numbers, decisions, trade-offs. The kind of arithmetic that determines whether the family stays warm or eats well, or, in harder weeks, neither. The line to the pay desk forms quickly. She falls into place behind two other women, both as worn as she is, but holding themselves with the dignity of those who keep going anyway. Conversations drift quietly through the line. Rent went up again. The price of coal. Can you believe it? My youngest needs new shoes. I do not know where the money will come from. I might take in laundry again this month, if I can find the time. The mother listens, each word echoing her own worries. Everyone here understands the balancing act of survival. Their struggles overlap like threads in a tapestry. When her turn comes, the supervisor sits behind the desk with a ledger and a stack of small brown pay envelopes. The envelopes look deceptively simple, thin paper holding the fragile numbers that dictate every corner of her life. Without smiling, the supervisor hands her the envelope. It is light. Too light. But it always is. She nods politely and steps aside, clutching the envelope as if it might try to escape. The moment she holds it, the mental math begins before she even opens it. Rent, coal, food, school supplies, 2, soap, thread, Industund, shoes. Her breath catches slightly at the last item. Shoes. Her youngest needs shoes. She pushes the thought aside for now. She walks outside, away from the crowd, to open the envelope in private. The air is cold, but the breeze feels good against her flushed skin. She tears the paper carefully and slides her fingers inside. Coins, bills, a few slips noting deductions for union fees or factory repairs. She counts everything slowly, as though speed might manipulate the outcome. It never does. When she finishes counting, the number sits heavy in her palm. It is not the worst week she has had, but it is far from enough. It never amounts to enough. Enough is a luxury, rarely afforded to women like her. She pulls out a small notebook from her coat pocket. The cover is worn, corners rounded from constant use. Inside are columns of numbers neatly written, carefully tracked. Every page holds the truth of a life lived one decision at a time. She begins listing: rent due in 2 days, coal almost gone, groceries lowest priority, but unavoidable, milk rising in price, school fees overdue by a week, shoes still impossible, soap nearly gone, needle and thread optional but necessary, electricity minimal but still a bill, medical cough syrup maybe next week. She runs her finger down each line, calculating what she can afford, what she must postpone, and what she must sacrifice. The decision-making feels like stitching a quilt in the dark. Every seam must be precise, or the entire thing unravels. Rent comes first. Always. A late rent notice is a shadow she refuses to let into her home. Coal comes second. Winter is unkind, and cold children are vulnerable children. Groceries come third, but only the essentials. Flour, oats, bread, maybe a bit of fruit, if the market offers discounted bruised pieces. Meat only when absolutely necessary, and even then, maybe just scraps for broth. She pauses at school fees. Her stomach tightens. The oldest's teacher mentioned the overdue payment 2 days ago, subtly, with a hint of concern behind the words. She knows the tone well. It means we are watching. In this era, a mother's respectability is often judged by her ability to maintain appearances. Falling behind, even slightly, attracts suspicion. She adds a small amount to the school fees column, just enough to quiet questions for another week. Then her pen stops at shoes. She stares at the word. Her youngest's toes pressed against the front of his shoes this morning. He did not complain, but she saw the wince. She saw the way he curled his toes inward to make space. New shoes cost money she simply does not have, but she can't ignore it. She writes a small note beside the word ask at the second-hand stall, and beneath it, patch soles again tonight. With the list adjusted, she does the math again. The totals come up short, as they always do. She draws a line through fruit, removing it from the grocery list. She reduces the amount for thread. She subtracts the small coin she wanted to save for emergencies. Her fingers shake as she writes the final sum. Anxiety settles into her chest, but she breathes through it. This is not a new feeling. She has learned to live with it the way one learns to live, with the ticking of a clock, always present, always pressuring, but eventually part of the background of life. She folds the money into her notebook and tucks both deep into her coat pocket. Her decisions have been made, even if they are not perfect. Even if they leave no room for error, they are the best she can manage. Before heading to the market, she stops by a small alley where a woman sells used clothing from a wooden crate. The mother kneels, lifting shoes one by one. Too big, too small, too worn, too thin-soled. Still, she searches. Hope lives in repetition. The seller watches her with a sympathetic expression. Hard week? She asks softly. The mother smiles faintly. They all are. The woman nods. Take these, she says, holding up a pair of small, scuffed shoes. Not perfect, but better than some. The mother turns them over, inspecting the soles. Still good. Uppers a bit scratched. Laces mismatched. But they could last a few months, maybe more if patched. She hesitates. The price is lower than new, but still a burden. The seller lowers her voice. Pay me next week, if you must. The mother swallows. Kindness, when offered softly, has a way of warming places inside her heart she forgets exist. She accepts the shoes, whispering a grateful thank you. She adds the amount to next week's notebook column. Another debt, another promise to keep. As she walks toward the market, her steps feel lighter, not because the money stretches, but because small victories matter more than anyone realizes. Shoes, even worn ones. Shoes are dignity. Shoes are protection. Shoes are peace of mind. She buys groceries with careful hands, counting each coin twice before exchanging it. She selects potatoes, flour, onions, a head of cabbage, and a small bottle of milk. She considers dried beans, but decides they can wait until next week. Every coin has a purpose. When she arrives home later, she lays everything on the kitchen table and stares at it, not with disappointment, with relief. These are the ingredients that will keep her children full for the next few days. As she begins to cook dinner, the anxiety of payday settles quietly into her bones, like cold air seeping through a window frame. But beneath the worry, beneath the calculations, beneath the endless choices she must revisit weekly, there is a quiet truth. She made it work. Not perfectly, not comfortably, but enough. And in her world, enough is a small, powerful triumph. The walk home after picking up the children is always a strange mix of relief and anticipation. Relief, because she finally has her little ones beside her alive, warm, chattering, asking questions, tugging at her sleeves. Anticipation, because she knows what waits behind the door when they reach home. The second round of her day, the evening marathon that begins the moment she turns the key in the lock. As they approach the house, the daylight has already softened into that cool, bluish glow that comes just before the sun disappears completely. Chimneys release thin trails of smoke across the sky. Neighbors hurry inside with bundles of groceries and arms full of firewood. Doors slam. Curtains close. The world begins shrinking into its evening rituals. She opens her door and instantly feels the familiar chill. The morning fire, long faded, has left only the faintest warmth clinging to the stove. The air inside is cold enough that her breath clouds for a moment. The children rush in, shedding scarves and shoes with little ceremony. One drops a school book. Another asks, "What is for dinner?" The youngest wants to show her a picture. He drew crayon lines, bright and enthusiastic, paper wrinkled from being gripped tightly all day. She smiles, kneeling to admire the drawing. "It is wonderful," she whispers, brushing his hair back. But even as she speaks, her mind is already racing. Dinner, chores, laundry, firewood, homework. All of it waiting like a stack of unopened letters. She hangs her coat, rolls up her sleeves, and moves toward the stove with a kind of determination born from years of repetition. She gathers coal from the bucket running low, but still enough for tonight, and builds a fire carefully, coaxing flame into being. The room slowly begins to warm, just enough to drive away the sharpest edge of the cold. Behind her, the children tumble through the space like small whirlwinds. "Where's my notebook?" "He touched my pencil." "Can I have more bread?" "I am hungry." "I am cold." "Can we play outside?" "Do we have homework today?" Questions come like raindrops, soft but constant. She takes a slow breath. This, too, is part of the evening, orchestrating chaos into something resembling structure. She answers gently, though her voice carries the weight of the day. She directs them to wash their hands, find their books, hang their coats properly, sit at the table. The process is not smooth. It never is. But it works well enough. With the fire going, she turns to the kitchen counter and begins preparing dinner. Tonight, it is a modest stew potatoes, onions, a few carrots, and scraps of dried herbs to give it warmth. She slices each ingredient with measured precision, making sure everything stretches far enough for seconds if needed. The pot simmers slowly, filling the small home with a scent that feels comforting, even if the meal is simple. She glances over at the children, who sit at the table working on their school assignments. The oldest writes, with her brow furrowed, biting her lip in concentration. The middle child taps his pencil, swinging his legs rhythmically. The youngest draws circles in the margins of his paper, humming softly. She watches them for a moment, letting herself feel a small bloom of tenderness. Their presence, noisy, messy, demanding, is the anchor of her life. If mornings are responsibility and afternoons are survival, evenings are the heart of her world, chaotic, overwhelming, but filled with small, precious moments of connection. Then the chaos begins again, as it does every night. A cup falls to the floor clatter. Someone cries out in frustration, "I do not understand this problem." Another tries to sneak bread from the table. Water spills. Someone sneezes. Someone fights with someone else over a broken pencil. She moves from one situation to the next, fixing, calming, mediating, comforting. She multitasks like someone who has no choice. Stir the stew, help with handwriting, patch a torn page, wipe water from the table, keep the youngest from climbing onto the chair, check the fire, salt the stew, kiss a scraped elbow. At one point, she pauses long enough to remove her shoes. Her feet ache from standing all day, from walking to and from the factory, from navigating the bustling market. The sensation of cool floorboards against her soles nearly makes her sigh out loud. Dinner, once ready, is served in mismatched bowls just like breakfast. The children gather eagerly, spoons in hand. The warmth of the stew fills the air, fogging the windows slightly. The meal is simple, but it is food. It is hot, and it is shared. As they eat, they talk over one another in that chaotic, joyful way siblings do. My teacher said we might get a play next month. We had a spelling test. Someone brought apples to class. We learned a new song. I got ink on my shirt. Can we have dessert? She listens to every word, nodding, laughing softly when appropriate, offering comfort when needed. Even as fatigue tugs at her eyelids, she makes space for these conversations. They matter. They remind her that her children are growing, learning, living. After dinner comes the evening sprint. Dishes pile up in the sink. She washes each one by hand, water turning lukewarm within minutes. Soap suds cling to her wrists. Behind her, the children begin arguing again. One insists the other took their pencil. Someone else claims they heard a noise outside. Someone can't find their bedtime clothes. Someone is too tired to stand. Someone is too awake to sit still. She settles arguments quietly. She tidies the table. She pulls out tomorrow's clothes and inspects them for loose seams. She checks the children's shoes again, just in case one developed a hole during the day. She sets aside the pair of second-hand shoes she bought, planning to clean them after the children sleep. She scrubs the pot, wipes the counters, collects laundry from corners of the room. She kneels on the floor to wash it by hand, cold water numbing her fingers. She wrings out shirts and socks, hanging them near the stove to dry. Her arms tremble from the effort. The children, now winding down, curl up near the fire with a small book. The oldest reads aloud softly, her voice steady. The younger two listen, drifting toward sleep. She glances over at them. In the dim light, three small bodies, safe and warm, and something inside her settles. Not happiness, exactly. Something gentler. A quiet gratitude wrapped in exhaustion. When it is finally time to get them ready for bed, she helps each child wash their face, brush their hair, and slip into their worn pajamas. She tucks them under blankets that are thin but warmed by the stove. She kisses their foreheads, one by one. "Good night, my loves," she whispers. A chorus of good night replies softly back. Once their breathing deepens and silence fills the room, she returns to the kitchen. The chaos is mostly gone now, leaving behind tired dishes drying on the counter, damp clothes hanging near the stove, and her own fatigue lingering like a physical weight. She should sleep. She needs sleep. But there are still things to do. Bills to review. Groceries to plan. Sewing to finish. Coal to ration. Buttons to tighten. She sits down at the table with her sewing kit and begins to mend the smallest clothes first. The thread glides unevenly between her fingers. Her eyes blur. Her back tightens. But she keeps going, because everything she does tonight makes tomorrow a little more manageable. Hours pass. The house grows fully quiet. The fire dims. Her own eyelids droop. Finally, when she cannot stitch another line, she blows out the lamp, drags herself to her small bed, and sinks into the lumpy mattress. The sheets feel cool and rough. Her muscles throb. She turns on her side and exhales slowly. The day is done. It was chaotic. It was exhausting. It wore her down physically and mentally. But it was hers. And her children are safe, full, and warm. Tomorrow it will all begin again. And she will rise again, because that is the rhythm of her life. Chaotic. Demanding, steady, filled with purpose. When the children finally fall asleep, the house settles into a silence so delicate she is almost afraid to breathe too loudly. The quiet is not peace, exactly more like a thin layer of calm stretched over a mountain of unfinished tasks. But for her, it is enough. It is the only space in the day where her thoughts can move without interruption. Yet this is also the time when the real weight of responsibility returns. Night is not rest. Night is work of a different kind. She moves through the dim kitchen like someone walking through memory, every step familiar, every gesture worn into her muscles through years of repetition. The only light comes from the small lamp on the table and the faint glow of the stove, now reduced to a soft orange pulse. She sits for a moment, letting the warmth touch her face. Her legs ache from standing since dawn. Her hands are stiff. Her shoulders feel as if they have carried the world. Still, she knows she cannot stop. Not yet. She rises with a quiet inhale and begins the first of her nightly rituals, clearing the day's remnants. Dishes stacked from dinner need washing. She fills the tin basin with water, watching the steam rise as she pours the kettle in. The warmth is temporary. Cold comes quickly in a house like this, but she dips her hands anyway, working the cloth over plates, bowls, spoons. The repetitive motion is soothing in its own way. The feel of ceramic under her fingertips is predictable, unlike life's uncertainties. She rinses each dish carefully, setting them on a towel near the stove, where they will dry slowly through the night. Next comes the table. She wipes crumbs into her hand, small pieces of bread and potato that cling stubbornly to the wood. She brushes them into a tin bowl to give to the birds in the morning. Nothing is ever wasted. She has lived too long with too little to allow even crumbs to be thrown away. The laundry waits in a corner, piled quietly like a tired animal. She kneels beside it, reaches for the cold water bucket, and begins to wash each garment by hand. The fabric is thin, worn from years of scrubbing, yet she handles it with the same care she gives her children. The youngest child's sweater, still slightly damp from earlier tears and spills, smells faintly of chalk and wood shavings from school. The middle child's shirt has ink stains from a leaky pen. The oldest's dress has a seam that split during the day. All of them carry the imprints of childhood, of growing, of learning, of life happening despite the difficulties. She rubs soap across the fabric, her hands reddening in the cold water. She wrings each piece tightly until her wrists ache, then hangs them near the stove. They sway gently in the warm draft, small ghosts of the day, drifting quietly in the shadows. These clothes will likely not be fully dry by morning, but she will press them near the fire before dressing the children. She always finds a way. Night chores continue like a long, slow wave. She sweeps the floor, brushing dust and soot into a neat pile. Coal dust gathers in corners, no matter how often she cleans. The broom's bristles are thinning, but she presses on. She wipes the kitchen counter with a damp cloth, scrubbing away the stains from peeled potatoes and spilled milk. She straightens chairs, aligns the shoes by the door, folds blankets, smooths wrinkles from the tablecloth. Then she sits again, opening her small notebook, the one she carries everywhere. She flips to a clean page and begins writing tomorrow's list. In her careful handwriting, she notes what groceries she needs, what errands must be done during lunch break, which bills demand attention, which clothes need buttons, which school assignments the children mentioned. She tallies the remaining money from today's budget calculations. Weeks like this make numbers feel like a creature she must charm, because if she angers it, everything could collapse. She hears a soft cough from the children's room. Instinctively, she rises and walks to the doorway. Peeking in, the youngest has kicked his blanket aside. She adjusts it gently, brushing hair off his forehead. He sighs, curls into the warmth, and continues sleeping. She stays a moment longer, drinking in the sight of all three, breathing quietly in their sleep. Their small chests rise and fall like soft tides. This is the moment she gathers strength, not from rest, but from purpose. Back in the kitchen, she pulls out her sewing kit. The wooden box creaks open, revealing needles, a spool of thread, loose buttons, scraps of fabric cut from old garments. She picks up the oldest child's dress and examines the torn seam. With slow precision, she threads the needle through dim light, squinting slightly. The stitches she makes are small, tight, almost invisible. Sewing is not a hobby. It is maintenance, survival, a skill that extends the life of everything they wear. She mends 2 shirts, a pair of socks, and the strap of a school bag that is beginning to fray. Her fingers grow numb after a while, but she keeps going. She knows that if she does not fix these now, they will fail tomorrow, and she cannot afford a broken strap or an unstitched hem on a school morning. Children must look cared for, even if the world only sees patched clothes. They must see a mother who tries. She ties the final knot on the thread and bites the end to cut it clean. There is still the matter of the second-hand shoes she bought earlier. She sets them on the table, examining them closely. The leather is scuffed. The soles are good, thankfully. She rubs them with a cloth dipped in a bit of oil, bringing back a hint of shine. She replaces the mismatched laces with a pair she found in her sewing tin, smoothing them until they look almost new. Tomorrow, her youngest will have shoes that fit. The thought fills her with a quiet wave of relief, small but powerful. The stove flickers, and she checks the coal level. Only a few pieces left for the night. She arranges them carefully, building the embers in a way that keeps warmth lingering until dawn. Coal is expensive. Every stone matters. She closes the stove door slowly, listening to the soft hum of rising heat. Finally, when the kitchen is clean, the laundry is hung, the clothes mended, the shoes polished, the list written, and every possible task completed, she allows herself to stop. She pours a small cup of warm water, not tea. She cannot spare more leaves. She sits at the table, wraps her hands around the cup, and breathes in the faint warmth. Her body is beyond tired. Her shoulders slump. Her eyes sting. Her back feels like it is made of iron bars. But this is the moment that belongs only to her. Quiet, modest, fleeting. She thinks of the day behind her. She thinks of the day ahead. She thinks of how many days she has survived, how many more she must endure. But she also thinks of the 3 small bodies sleeping in the next room, and how every chore she completed tonight is a promise she is keeping to them. The house is silent now. The night is deep. The world outside sleeps, and only when her body can no longer fight the heaviness in her eyelids does she stand, turn off the lamp, and walk to her small bed. The mattress dips under her weight. The cold sheets kiss her skin. She pulls the blanket over herself, curls her legs, and lets out a long breath, one she has been holding since morning. In the darkness, she whispers a tiny prayer, not a religious one, but a human one. A wish for strength, a hope for tomorrow, a quiet thanks for making it through. Then sleep finally claims her, soft and heavy and desperately needed. Night chores are done. The world is still. And for a few hours, she rests. Judgment is not always loud. It does not always announce itself with harsh words or pointed fingers. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet moments, an expression held a second too long, a whisper exchanged between strangers, a tone that sinks beneath the surface like a stone dropped into water. For her, judgment is the background noise of life, subtle but constant, woven into nearly every corner of her days. It begins the moment she steps outside her door. The neighborhood is a patchwork of families, each with their own lives, their own routines, their own burdens. But some burdens are easier to hide than others. Hers shows itself in the threadbare coats, in the patched clothes, in the hurried steps she takes every morning because she cannot afford to be late to work. People notice these things. They always do. As she walks her children to school, she feels the eyes of neighbors following her. Not always cruel, not always unkind, but curious in a way that stings. Some nod politely. Others look away, pretending they did not see her at all. A few, the more outspoken ones, offer advice she did not ask for. Children should eat more fruit. One woman mentioned once, noting how thin her youngest looked. Make sure they stay warm. The cold gets into their bones. Another suggested pointedly while adjusting her own child's brand new scarf. She smiles politely, though each comment settles inside her like small weights. Advice disguised as kindness. Concern disguised as evaluation. They do not understand that she already knows these things, knows them more intimately than they ever will. She knows the prices of fruit. She knows the cost of coal. She knows the ache of guilt when her children cough at night and the medicine bottle is nearly empty. She carries all that knowledge silently, protecting her children from its weight. Teachers, too, observe her with a certain careful distance. At afternoon pickup, when she arrives tired from the factory, her dress slightly wrinkled, coal dust still clinging to her sleeves, she can feel the subtle shift in their demeanor. Their eyes scan the children, their clothes, their expressions. The single mother label was placed on her long before she ever spoke a poor word. Homework was not completed, one teacher remarked once, her tone vaguely concerned. It is important to stay involved in their studies. The implication hung in the air. The mother nodded, apologizing softly despite having helped her children with assignments until nearly midnight the night before, squinting in dim lamplight. She did not explain. Explanations rarely change these encounters. People believe what they choose to believe. Even simple interactions at the market carry a quiet tension. Shopkeepers glance at the coins she counts twice before paying. Some are patient. Others sigh if she hesitates, even for a second. She feels the pressure of their impatience pressing against her ribs. It is not hostility. It is something milder, but sharper. A subtle belief that her struggle is inconvenient, that her caution with money is burdensome. As she lifts potatoes from a basket, she overhears a pair of women matching fabrics at a nearby stall. They say she works at the factory, one murmurs. With 3 children, alone. A pause. Must be difficult. Another pause, weighted with meaning. I suppose some people make choices that follow them. The mother keeps her gaze fixed on the vegetables, but her hands tighten around the thin skin of an onion. Their words spill into her chest like cold water. Not because they are new, but because they are familiar, repeated in different voices across the years. People do not always speak cruelty plainly. Most hide it beneath concern, beneath observation, beneath the guise of conversation. But she hears what sits underneath. She hears it every day. Even church on Sundays, a place meant for comfort, becomes a quiet stage of comparison. Families arrive dressed in their best, children clean and polished, mothers wearing hats trimmed with ribbons. She enters humbly, with clothes mended for the 5th time, with gloves missing a fingertip she does not have time to fix. People nod, but with a softness that is not warmth. It feels more like pity wrapped in politeness. Pity is its own kind of judgment. When the sermon touches on family values or responsibilities, she feels the unspoken implication settle over her like dust. People do not say it aloud, but she senses the unspoken narrative swirling in their minds. A complete family is stability, and anything else is failure. As if life unfolded only in neat shapes. As if misfortune were always a choice. She sits quietly in her pew, hands folded, head slightly bowed, not in shame, but in exhaustion. She keeps her children close, brushing lint from their shoulders, smoothing their hair, making sure they sit still. She does this not to impress others, but because she wants her children to feel proud of themselves, even when the world insists on making them feel less. At work, the judgment is different. It is practical, cold, rooted in performance. She is watched closely for signs of slowing down, for signs of slipping, for signs of strain that might interfere with output. Being a single mother in a factory means being doubted by default. Supervisors assume she will miss days. They assume her mind is divided. They assume her responsibilities make her unreliable. So she works harder, faster, better. She pushes her body through fatigue to avoid giving them any reason to confirm their assumptions. She rarely speaks during shifts, not because she is timid, but because talking feels like a luxury when she is trying to hold everything together. Even in the rare moments she allows herself to rest, she can feel society's silent gaze pressing into her thoughts. The world has expectations for women, how they should behave, how they should mother, how they should appear, how they should survive hardship without looking like they are struggling. These expectations wrap themselves around her like invisible threads, tightening every time she falters. And yet, she endures. She moves through her life with a quiet resilience that does not require applause. She carries her children through mornings and evenings, through hunger and warmth, through sickness and growth, through each day that she manages to hold the world together with nothing but her two hands. The judgment never disappears. It lingers in the air during school drop-offs, hums beneath conversations with neighbors, hides in comments about rent, clothing, behavior. People do not understand her story, yet they evaluate it as if they do. But when the mother sits alone at night, after the children are asleep and the lamp casts a soft circle of light around her, the outside world fades. In that fragile stillness, she feels something that society never seems willing to see: her humanity, her effort, her sacrifice, her strength. She touches the edge of her sewing basket, fingers brushing over the wooden lid. She looks toward the children's room, listening to their soft breathing, and quietly, gently, she allows herself one small truth. The world may judge her constantly, but it does not know her. It does not see the fierce love behind every stitch she sews. It does not feel the ache in her muscles as she fights through another day. It does not hear the courage in her footsteps each morning. She knows her own worth, even if no one else does. Peace, for her, does not arrive with fanfare. It does not sweep in like a warm tide or wrap itself around her like a blanket. It comes quietly, almost shyly, slipping between the cracks of her day in moments so small she could almost miss them if she did not cling to them with both hands. They are fleeting, but they are hers. And in a life defined by endless responsibility, those fragile seconds of stillness become something sacred. It usually begins after the children have finally surrendered to sleep, their breathing soft and steady behind the thin bedroom door. The house, exhausted from the day's noise and motion, settles into a gentle calm. The stove hums faintly, glowing like an ember at the heart of the room. The ticking of the clock becomes louder now that all other sounds have faded. Even her own footsteps sound different, quieter, more deliberate, because nighttime has its own rules. It demands softness. She sits at the kitchen table, the small lamp casting a pale golden halo over the wood. Her hands rest around a cup of warm water or the last bit of leftover tea. There is no sugar, no cream, no comfort beyond the heat itself, but she savors it as though it were the most luxurious drink in the world. In this moment, she is not working. She is not rushing. She is not being measured or judged. She is simply sitting, breathing, existing. The weariness in her bones is deep, an ache that feels older than she is, but the quiet eases it, just slightly. She listens to the fire, the faint rustle of laundry drying nearby, the occasional sigh from the floorboards as the house settles. These sounds, mundane to anyone else, feel tender to her. They remind her that she has made it through another day, that survival, though unglamorous, is a truth she continues to achieve. Sometimes she closes her eyes and lets her thoughts drift like a small boat on still water. She does not daydream about grand things No distant travels, no wild luxuries. Her mind instead wanders to softer, modest wishes. The warmth of a heavier quilt, shoes that last a full season, a day without cold creeping through the windows, a kitchen with a sturdier stove, enough coins left over 1 week to buy a tin of jam without calculating every consequence. These dreams are simple, but they feel vast to her. She lets herself imagine them in this quiet hour, because imagining costs nothing, and hope, no matter how delicate, is a kind of sustenance too. Her fingers often drift to small objects that bring her comfort. A button from one of her children's old coats, smooth from being handled so often. A folded piece of paper where she once wrote a promise to herself, keep going. A spool of thread, a symbol of how she holds everything together stitch by stitch, gesture by gesture. She thinks of her children, not the chaos of their evening squabbles or the rush of preparing them for school, but the softer pieces, their laughter, the way the youngest curls into her side, the determined posture of the oldest, the curiosity brimming in the middle child's eyes. In these late hours, her memory smooths the harsh edges of the day and lets her see only the sweetness, the innocence, the small joys that remind her why she wakes up every morning and begins again. This is the hour where she can finally feel proud without the world interrupting. No staring neighbors, no hurried teachers, no supervisors watching her pace. No need to pretend she is not tired. Here, in the dim kitchen light, she allows herself to feel all the strength she carried today. She thinks of the moments that would go unnoticed by anyone else, the way she stretched stew to feed everyone, the way she patched a shirt just in time, the way she soothed a tearful child, the way she kept the fire alive with almost no coal left. These small victories are invisible to the outside world, but here, in her private quiet, they shine. Peace comes also in the smallest gestures of rest. The way she dips her hands into warm water to ease the sting of cold and sewing needles. The way she rubs her shoulders gently, pushing fatigue back for a few minutes. The way she leans back in her chair, letting her spine straighten and release tension inch by inch. Sometimes, if the night is kind, she even allows herself a moment to remember who she was before life became a series of tasks. A younger version of herself, with laughter that was not weighed down by worry, with dreams that did not require permission from her circumstances. She sees that young woman for a brief heartbeat and feels tenderness toward her, not regret. Life changed her, but it did not break her. Outside the small window, the street is dark and still. Lamps flicker weakly along the sidewalks. The wind rustles through bare branches. The world outside may be indifferent, but it is quiet, and that is enough. She watches her own reflection in the window glass, tired eyes, hair coming loose from its pins, hands weathered from work. She does not judge herself the way others do. She sees strength there, perseverance, a woman who carries more than anyone realizes. Eventually, the cup in her hands grows cold. The fire dims further. The clock ticks closer to the next day. She knows she must sleep soon, or tomorrow will begin with an even heavier ache. But she lingers, a little longer, holding on to this tiny, precious fragment of peace. In this moment, silence is not emptiness. It is a gentle friend. When she finally rises, she moves slowly, savoring the final seconds before responsibility takes hold again. She checks the stove one last time, adds a small piece of coal if she can spare it, and turns off the lamp. The darkness is soft now, not frightening, It wraps around her like a thin blanket as she walks to her bed. The children breathe quietly. She pauses at their doorway, watching them sleep. Their faces, peaceful and untroubled, look like a reward she worked the entire day to earn. She smiles softly in the dark, a smile no one will ever see, but one that holds everything: love, exhaustion, pride, hope. She climbs into bed. The mattress is lumpy, the blankets thin, but she sinks into them with gratitude anyway. As she pulls the blanket up to her chin, she whispers a tiny promise to herself, one she renews every night. Tomorrow, I will do it all again, and I will survive again. Her eyes close. Sleep rises to meet her, slow and gentle. The peace she felt in those fleeting minutes lingers just long enough to soften the edges of her dreams. And though tomorrow will bring noise, cold, work, judgment, hunger, and exhaustion, she holds on to the knowledge that peace, brief as it is, will return again tomorrow night. A small flicker of light in a life that demands everything but gives back only moments. She cherishes those moments, because they are the proof that she is still human, still alive, still fighting, still hoping, and still capable of finding beauty in the quietest corners of her world. When we step back and look at her day as a whole, it becomes clear that her life is not defined by a single struggle, but by 1,000 small acts of love, stitched quietly into the fabric of every hour. From the pre-dawn cold to the late-night silence, she moves through a world that demands more from her than it ever gives in return. And yet, she keeps going, not loudly, not dramatically, just steadily, with a resilience that rises each morning and settles gently each night. Her strength is not the kind that fills history books. It is not the kind people gather to applaud. It is quieter, softer, the kind that holds a family together against the odds, the kind that turns scarcity into stability and fear into routine. And while society may judge her, underestimate her, or overlook her entirely, the truth is undeniable. Every day she survives is a quiet victory. Every evening she tucks her children into bed is a triumph. Every tomorrow she faces is proof of a courage that never announces itself, but never fades. Her life may seem ordinary from the outside, but inside its rhythms lies a story of endurance, love, sacrifice, and profound human dignity. The kind of story that reminds us how many unseen lives have carried the world forward through history, not with grand gestures, but with small, unwavering acts of care. And tonight, as the lamp goes out and her breathing softens into sleep, we are reminded of something simple and deeply true. Even the smallest flicker of hope can light an entire home when it is held by someone who refuses to let the darkness win. Thank you so much for spending this quiet moment with me and for walking through her world with such care. I hope this story brought you warmth, perspective, or simply a peaceful pause in your day. I will see you again soon. Sleep well, take good care, and good night, everyone.